Welcome back to the Women on Top, everybody. I am so happy to be here with you today. And today I have such an amazing guest. Really excited to have this conversation. Sitting here with me, I have Sarah Catherine, who goes by SC, and she is a former attorney turned educator, storyteller, really is like this joy seeker. And she has a really interesting background where she traded the courtroom for the classroom to help people really live more meaningful, connected lives. She's a graduate of Vanderbilt University and Stanford Law School. She now teaches at Vanderbilt and is the author of Styles of Joy, where she explores how kind of these small shifts can really create a more fulfilling life. So we're going to dive into all of that. Throughout all of her work, SC has really inspired so many to embrace this idea of curiosity, connection, and just really live into the richness of their life. So I'm really excited to have her with me. Welcome to the show, SC. So glad you're here.
I am so happy to be here. Thank you, Valerie. And I already know from our few minutes of connecting before recording started that this will be a great conversation.
Oh, you're so kind. Thank you. Yeah, same with me as well. I feel like we just had like a natural organic connection. Podcasting is so magical like that. So I kind of am going to just dive right in. I'm curious because you still have a Stanford law degree and you had this like legal career and all of these like external kind of markers of success, if you will. I'm wondering, because I'm guessing there must have been like a moment, like a pivotal moment for you, or maybe multiple moments where you realize that this idea of like achievement and joy are maybe not necessarily the same thing. Was there kind of that, throughout your journey, did you have some of those moments?
Absolutely. When I graduated from Stanford Law School, I was practicing big law. I was in the commercial real estate group at a large law firm, at Texas-based firm. And honestly, I just remember thinking, I think of all the jobs I could have in big law, this one is the best. I have amazing bosses. I was very close with my coworkers. We worked a ton, but in terms of culture and environment, I felt so lucky. And yet at the same time, I knew that's where I was not best fit. I vividly remember, you asked, were there multiple moments of kind of pause or hesitation, or was there really one that stood out? And I I don't think I would have left when I did, but for the pandemic. And I just was suddenly in a brand new position. Not technically, I had the same job, but in reality, my world was so different having the exact same job, exact same position once I was working from home because the pandemic stripped out so much of what I loved about the job. I was so involved with pro bono work. I did a lot of immigration work and was challenging, you know, conditions in detainment camps at the border. And I was so passionate where I was supposed to be reading zoning documents and doing commercial real estate work, but actually I was maxing out how much pro bono work I could do, which was unrelated to what I was hired to do. And that point was made by a mentor of mine. I called her when I was really having doubts about whether I could stick this out. And she said, "Okay, tell me what you like about your job." And I told her, I said, "Well, I love pro bono. And I love recruiting. I have so much fun going to different campuses across the country and talking to law students. And I said, I love all these, this and that. And she said, "Well, I hate to break it to you, but you don't like your job." And I said, "What do you mean I don't like my job? I just told you what I like about my job." And she said, "You weren't hired to do any of those things. Do you like the billable work and drafting contracts?" I said, "Well, no." I said, "Not really at all." And that was a wonderful distinction that
Yeah.
she helped me make and gave me a lot of clarity when it was time to navigate.
Wow. I mean, what a what a message to receive. So, a couple of things. I'm curious, where did you find this mentor? Because I would like to find this mentor for myself and because what a great mirror that is to have somebody really reflect back to you what was actually going on for you. So, how did you find her and how can maybe others who are looking for that kind of mentor find somebody like that?
Well, I'm so happy that you're asking me that question because I feel like I've told this story so many times on different podcasts and platforms, but no one has said, well, who actually said that? So her name is Anne Levine, and she calls herself the law school expert, is her brand. And I say she calls herself, she is, in my mind, the law school expert. And she helps people with applications and the law school admissions process. I met her through a mutual friend when I was thinking about going to law school, and we just hit it off kind of famously. And this was many, many years prior. And we kind of kept in touch. And I knew that she had had some amazing pivots in her career as a lawyer. And, she's written multiple books and is, she's just she's a truth teller. And that's what I really value in a mentor is someone who can hold that mirror back to you. And she's very busy, she has a lot of clients, and most importantly, I think for people listening, she was not at my law firm. So I know that we're kind of always looking to people who are a few steps above us, whether it's at the company, at the firm, whatever it may be. But sometimes having an external resource is so critical, again, for that truth telling and to hold that mirror back at you. And another piece of advice she gave me, which I thought was hilarious, and I'll never forget this specific conversation we had. She said, "I have 10 minutes, but, like, I'll carve out 10 minutes for you." And I was like, "Aye, aye, Captain. Perfect. Let's lock in. I'll take all 10." And I had told her, I said, "Well, I also really like the people at the firm." And she goes, "And by the way," after she said, "You weren't hired to do this job," she goes, "And by the way, you should never stay in a job because you like the people, because I know you and you like most people. So that is not a make or break quality at a job." And I thought that actually is true. I I was so glad she said that. I was putting a little too much weight in that one factor.
Yeah. What amazing advice again, like just to have such a powerful person who can see through some of that, who knows you well enough to be able to say that to you. And like I know you, I know you like a lot of the world. So you'll be able to connect with so many people at other jobs. I'm wondering to touch on this mentorship topic again, how did you how did you find her? And like kind of know, okay, this is the person I'm going to ask to be a mentor. Because I think there's a lot of women, myself included, who sometimes feel intimidated or like, gosh, they're so busy. Like, who am I to ask whatever this person to be a mentor? And then I think we can start there, but I'm curious what you also did with the 10 minutes, because I think that's really crucial is when somebody says, I have this amount of time, but it's this short amount of time. I feel like you as the mentee or the person coming to them for help is like, you have to have some punchy questions ready to go. So that you're both getting value. So there's a couple things in that question. Sorry, that's very long.
That's a great question. So a I went to Vanderbilt for undergrad, and a Vanderbilt student who I didn't really know saw that I had posted something about applying to law school. I think I made some cheesy joke about how hard the LSAT was. I don't even remember what I would have posted. I mean, this is so many years ago. And he reached out to me, said, "Oh, are you applying to law school? What's your email address?" And I didn't know him very well. And I'm like, "What? Why? Huh?"
Yeah.
And I was like, "This is so strange. What is this about?" So I sent him my email address. He sent me 13 PDFs of study materials, all the things he wished he would have known. And he said, "Here's the
Wow.
thing, this is such a lone wolf process." And he was at Harvard Law at the time. And he said, "This is so challenging to navigate. It's so different than, when you're applying to college. Most people in your high school are doing the exact same thing in parallel with you. Whereas grad school, just you're like wandering in the wilderness if you don't have the right guidance and advice." And and he said, "But if there's one piece of advice that you take from me, it's you need to reach out to Anne Levine. You need to read her books." He said it completely changed my life. And thought that's a really strong endorsement. I am wandering in the wilderness, and I would love a guide or a Sherpa. So I reached out to her. I said, "David sent me your way." And what is so special about her is I really felt that throughout that process, I got a sense of how she told the truth so consistently. She
Mhm.
was not afraid to take off the kid gloves. She was not sugarcoating anything, and I needed that level of intensity. I responded very well to that because she was so sure and so clear in the
Yeah.
advice that she was giving, and as she got to know me so well, like through her coaching and kind of heard a lot of my personal stories of maybe I am passionate about this. She wanted to make sure I knew my why. Why are you going to law school? What are you interested in? What are you passionate about? And that was so wonderful because I think I peeled back layers of my own onion, if
Yeah.
that makes sense. So after working together, I thought she had a real true sense of who I was as a human being. And that was why, after we kept in touch socially for several years and kind of catch up, and she'd say, so and so students applying to Stanford, would you be willing to hop on the phone with them? And I would constantly be referring clients her way. And so for that reason, we sort of had a rapport. But again, that one day when I really hit the wall and thought, I just don't think I can do this anymore, she was the one to reach out to. She had experience in the industry, she wasn't at the firm, and she knew me so well as a person. So,
Mhm.
your second part of the question, what do you do with that 10 minutes? That is a killer question because so many people who are so in demand and people are constantly asking so much of them, and again, now that I feel so lucky to be in the opposite position from so many Vanderbilt students and my students I have in my classroom, or, they're asking me for advice. And I appreciate students who are very thoughtful about how they use their time with me because both parties deserve maximum value in terms of input and output. And there's an art to this because I find that when I'm asking Anne all those years ago, how do I think through this decision to stay or leave, to stick it out? When do I leave? All of these pieces. Yes, she needed to know the facts and the circumstances. And I was able to give her that overview very briefly. But really, what I was asking someone I trusted so much is how do I make hard decisions? There are a lot of details flying around with kind of micro information, situations, yada, yada, yada. But actually, what's the bigger picture conversation? What's the bigger question that I'm asking advice on? Because more often, that's what you're going to be able to take with you as
Yeah.
someone seeking guidance and advice is something that is something in your toolkit that lasts far beyond, this particular circumstance. And I just think if I were thinking through, and I asked mentors for advice all the time, thinking through the zoom out of the bigger picture, because then the person giving the advice is able to speak to it more directly too. Maybe you're not in the weeds. Maybe she's not at a big firm. Maybe she didn't love pro bono when she was practicing law and wasn't that into recruiting. That's kind of irrelevant. All those factors I'm throwing at her. What's relevant is how do you make big career pivots and changes? And so I would advise someone to zoom out when they're using that 10 minutes.
Yeah. What's almost coming to my mind is like almost just like kind of writing down all of the questions you think you have for this person and then going, what are the bigger questions behind this? Because
Yes,
like you just said, it's probably more than just the thing. There's probably something that's actually broader that you're trying to get at. Um, at least that's kind of what I'm taking from that a little bit. So I think that's really important because as I'm thinking about it, right, 10 minutes is not very long. That can go by real fast. And if you're not thoughtful and intentional, then that's kind of time wasted in a way. And so I think that's really helpful for us to think about, especially as we're maybe approaching mentors or people who we kind of, are kind of above us in different ways.
exactly.
So she gives you this advice. She like says, okay, gosh, you know what? You don't actually like your job. Right? Like big newsflash to you.
Amazing line.
Uh,
Hate to break it to you, you don't like your job.
yeah. Okay. So she's literally telling you this, calling you out in that way. what is going through your mind? And what after that conversation, are you do you agree with her? Are you like, "Gosh, this is the thing I needed to hear," or were you feeling kind of like you got hit by a bus, you know? What was going on there?
So, a little bit of context, this conversation was happening in early 2021. And so it was nearly a year into the pandemic, nearly a year of really struggling. I want to, we're talking about zooming out a little bit in these conversations. So I don't want to get too in the weeds of the ins and outs of what it was like to practice law in this era. But the difficulty was being on the billable system and being in the pandemic where so many projects were on hold because, clients just weren't sure which direction they were going to go with these long runway projects. I wasn't hitting my goals. And I was not hitting my goals. No one was hitting their goals. And the difficulty with that is it was so challenging to wake up every single day and know that I didn't have a shot in the world at hitting my annual hourly requirement. And I woke up every single day feeling like a failure, despite the fact that it was out of my control. I was a junior associate. I couldn't control what projects were and were not online. And that was very hard for my mental health because it was so difficult to stay motivated when you're just thinking, I'm never going to cross that finish line. So I took a few days off for the first time since I'd started practicing a couple years prior. And I thought, this is going to do the trick. I'm going to go to the beach. I'm going to take 3 days. It was like 3 or 4 days, maybe. And I am going to come back refreshed. I am going to be a new person. So my first Monday back, I woke up, I exercised, I cooked a healthy breakfast, and I sat down at my home desk and I could not will myself to work. I had never experienced that in my life. I also had a project deadline and it was actually the type of work I loved the most. And so I had sort of like thought, oh, that's going to be the perfect combination. Work I love under a deadline. Check, check. And I sat down and I was like, no, no, it's just post vacation blues. It's totally fine. Tomorrow, I'm going to wake up, cook a healthy breakfast, exercise, sit down at my desk, and I'm going to crush it. I couldn't move my hands on the keyboard. This level of burnout, it was physical. And that's when I called Anne. And I said,
Wow.
I'm afraid I'm really at the end of the rope here in a way I've never experienced in any capacity before. And so that's sort of the lead up to this conversation. So once she said, the iconic line, I hate to break it to you, you don't like your job. I just thought, I'm really not sure I can do this anymore. After however many months of working from home, sitting around waiting for scraps of projects to float my way, I had days I sat at home all day, every day, waiting to get a call, waiting to get an email, waiting to get a project, and I wouldn't get called till 11:45 p.m. It
Wow.
it was really hard on me. And again, like I said earlier, I did love that job. So I thought there was so much good in it. And I think we're so often trained to keep our eye towards optimism that and I think that has a time and place. When in fact, when making a big decision, I think it's important to look at all factors on the table
Yeah.
and take off the optimistic lens just for a little bit to get the full picture.
Yeah. Interesting. So then you are kind of realizing, I don't think I can keep doing this. And then where's like the transition where you start to go, okay, here's some clues about the work I really like. Now, how do I find that work and make it work for me? We'll start there.
Right. So this is where the story gets pretty off the rails. So I am a very decisive person. Once I've made up my mind, I if I see a clear path and then I'm going to take it. And after that conversation, I put in my 2 weeks.
Wow.
It was that day.
Oh
I
my gosh.
I didn't recognize my own body. It was so extreme after so many months of that experience. And I just thought, you know what? I'm not sure what is next. I know I'm not going to continue to practice law. And I want to shed light on that a little bit. When I went to law school, I wasn't even sure I was going to practice at all. I thought I was going to go into my family's commercial real estate business. And so that then I got recruited by this firm. The firm was fantastic. I was in a practice area where I was learning a lot that would enable me to be, I hoped, a certain value add in the commercial real estate business. And so I would just in out of abundance of transparency, I had the financial flexibility to stop practicing law. I don't want any
Gotcha.
listener to do some digging around and be like, why am I going to listen to her on like pivoting and so forth when she was financially able to do that? I'm very open and receptive to that conversation. That being said, when I felt like I hit a brick wall and it wasn't about jumping over it, I couldn't go through it. It was time to change. At the same time, my personal life was collapsing, and I ended up going through a debilitating divorce. And so right after this pivot, all of a sudden, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a wife, I'm not a daughter-in-law, I'm not a sister-in-law, I'm not an aunt anymore. All of a sudden, all these things come crashing down in a certain month span. And I really I mean, I don't mean to laugh because nothing was funny about it, but I hardly recognized the woman in the mirror. It went from, okay, box checking, linear path to spaghetti on the floor. Just polar opposite life chapters. And I had this opportunity. I was getting recruited to teach at Vanderbilt. And here's why I want to really talk about that and what that pivot looked like is and what I want every single one of your listeners to take away from this conversation is that your dreams are not other people's dreams. That dream that calms you at night as you're falling asleep, if you're like struggling to fall asleep and that's your daydream and where you go and your happy place, for me, and this is so cheesy, but I don't care. My daydream was my opening lecture as a professor. Valerie, that was delusional. That was delusional. So I thought I never even said that out loud because I lived in Austin, but I would close my eyes and I was lecturing at Vanderbilt.
Wow.
The possibility of that did not even remotely feel like it was on the table. And after I pivoted away from practicing law, I got reconnected with a former professor of mine, and he recruited me back to the department. And when he did, I said, "You cannot tease me. You don't understand. Don't joke. That would be my greatest dream, and a dream that I didn't even have the courage to say aloud."
Mm,
Because I just thought, and this is one of my points here, I just thought, oh, everyone wants to be a college professor. No, they don't.
yeah.
No, they don't. If you are daydreaming about starting a cookie business, guess what? I'm here to tell you I've never had that dream.
Yeah.
A, a friend posted, a friend of mine just completed her first run on Broadway, and I'm so proud of her. And she posted the most heartwarming post on Instagram. And it was the photo of little her. She was 9 years old at Broadway for the first time. And she said, "This is my lifelong dream." Can't relate.
Yeah.
Everyone has different dreams, and it's so important to listen to those quiet voices.
I just love your story. And, the reason, of course, I'm asking these questions is so that we are able to, connect the dots through the lens of what you went through here. So thank you for kind of articulating, like, for the listener, like, here's the message. I think it's amazing that you were presented with this opportunity and you'd been dreaming about that. I'm wondering what would you have to say for the woman who's like, gosh, I know there's something else for me, but I don't have that specific vision yet? Like, what advice do you have for her now?
Well, I love that because sometimes it feels abstract, this hunch of like, I know it's not this, and I can't point directly to what it is next, but something is stirring inside of me. I will say, when I was navigating acute grief associated with this divorce, and I was really struggling, I'm a really sensitive person. So this experience just absolutely decked me. I would close my eyes, and I hardly ever have told a soul this because it sounds kind of woo woo, but when I closed my eyes and had no idea what was in store in the future, I saw myself on stage with a microphone.
Hmm.
And that was so odd to me because I didn't have experience public speaking. Of course, we did some exercises in law school, but like big whoop, whatever. That's not okay. All right, group projects in college.
Right,
Not
right.
whatever. Not I've never taken a public speaking class. That is anyway. And I thought to myself, I was like, huh, that's interesting. Maybe I'm going to host like a charity fundraiser someday. I don't, I truly couldn't interpret what this vision was that kept popping in my head. Well, fast forward, I, and I know that, we're not focused on the book entirely in this podcast, but um, in this, I'll give a little brief overview. So in this season of grief, I started turning to happy music in a way I never had before. And I would go on these long walks. I'm coming back to the microphone thing, but we
Yeah.
just have to get there.
Yeah. No,
So
I
I
love it.
started going on these long walks in Austin, and I started listening to Harry Styles. I typed good energy one day on Spotify as a cry for help. I'd never listened to Harry Styles. His third album, Harry's House, came out 2 days after I told my husband we were going to get divorced. And it was all brand new, which is important because music holds memory like a scent. You say freshman year of college, I say Miley Cyrus Party in the USA. It's just like
Yeah.
locked in. And I was subconsciously looking for a new soundtrack for a new life. Well, fast forward, I became obsessed with Harry Styles. And I don't use that phrase lightly. I saw his show 17 times in 5 countries. I had a Harry Styles themed Eat, Pray, Love adventure.
So
And
cool.
along the way, I started critically thinking about joy for the first time. What is joy? Who has joy? Who doesn't have it? Is it big? Is it small? Is it permanent? Is it fleeting? And I somehow wrote a 4-part framework that endeavors to answer the question of how do we maximize joy in all of our lives. Styles of Joy came out last year. It hit the USA Today bestseller list. I went on an 18-city book tour, and it has opened up a speaking career that I never saw coming in a million years. But there was a little part of me that when I closed my eyes in the thick of grief and I saw a microphone, and I never understood that. I
Wow.
never understood that.
Oh my gosh. What
And
a wild journey of these dots that truly connect. And such a good message there about like maybe you don't the picture doesn't need to be like super clear. It can be fuzzy, it can be a little blurry, you don't know what it means, but there's something there that's calling to you, that's kind of pulling to you. And so I guess like you continued to follow that tug in different ways, but it seems as though the catalyst for all of this is the joy that you cultivated. And I feel like that was like the energy that you needed in order to kind of like bring about these opportunities in a way. Um, so I wonder if you might speak about that. Like, where does the joy come into it and this passion that you have around some of the research and what you speak about with it?
absolutely. Joy is such a fascinating conversation when it comes to career alignment because I think it's so misunderstood. I think when you say, oh, what brings you joy? Chase that in the workplace. It's like, okay, like that, it doesn't always land.
Yeah.
However, that being said, I think joy is a fabulous place to start because if you really understand what I call your joy profile, it is what makes you uniquely you. As I lead these workshops about joy, as I lecture about joy at Vanderbilt, I make the audience free write, just a list of things that bring them joy. And I'm able to encourage them and say, no two people in this room have the same list. It's a similar encouragement as no two people have the same dreams necessarily. And so for me, if you would have asked me, what brings you joy? If I was trying to think through a career, I would say I love people. I love storytelling. And that's how I want to spend my weekends is I want to feed people. I want to cook for a small army at my house. I want to gather people around a table and I want to have quality time with people. And I want to get to know them. Anyone is welcome around my table. Everyone who is in my close orbit knows this. They don't have to ask if so and so can come. Great. I just need to know if they have any allergies. Of course they can
Yeah.
come. But that sort of through line that feels so consistent in my personality, that even feels consistent with how I showed up when I was practicing law at a firm. And we referenced that when I was talking to Anne in that pivotal phone call. Is she said, well, you love people. So like don't let that be, the unique driver of this decision. And so I just think as I was on these adventures and as I was kind of pulling myself out of this grief in this unexpected way, I was never a concert person. I wouldn't have even told you I really liked crowds particularly, but all of a sudden I'm traveling with strangers I met along the way. I'm having this, we're staying in hostels, I'm on all these adventures, like we're just having the best time. But interestingly, in that season of so much identity stripping, no longer a lawyer, no longer, this kind of shedding of skin, no longer a wife or a daughter in law or sister in law, all these roles went away. And it's like I had the courage to go even further of what happens when I'm anonymous in a crowd of 90,000 people. And no one cares where I did or did not practice law, and no one cares where I went to law school or did not go to law school. And it made me ask myself, who am I in any and every room I walk into? And Valerie, that has done more for my career. That has done more for my confidence. That has done more for my sense of self than any other thing I've experienced in my 35 years of life. Is to know how I'm able to show up in any environment and be consistent. And it had a transformative effect on my life because I understood that that kind of inherent alignment with how I can show up for people around me and show up for myself. And I think the reason I mention that is so tied to joy. To
Yeah.
understand what brings you joy is to really understand who you are. And I write in the book that your character and your core values, that might make up who you are, but your joy is what makes you uniquely you. It's where your passions intersect, your talents intersect. And so for me, following my joy
Hmm.
led to this unbelievable personal development and self-reflection, but in a way that's not surprising to me because I think of look at all the people who have landed where they're supposed to be. It's because they kept pulling that thread. And sometimes it looks counterflow. Was anyone else leaving corporate law and seeing Harry Styles 17 times in 5 countries? No. But look at how it totally changed my life. But for following what looked unconventional to other people but felt so right to me, I wouldn't be here.
You have just said so many things that I hope people go back and go back 30 and just replay these sections. I love what you said, like the question of, and I'm going to get it wrong, but who am I in each and every room or something like that? Like, who am I in all of these different environments? And I've never heard that before. That is such a great exercise for people because I think it's one thing to say well, who are you? Which is such a big question anyway. And then, yeah, what are your values? But it's different to actually ask that of who are you in each and every room that you're in? I'm going to have to take that with me and like really sit with that in a different way. And then this joy piece is so interesting. So I'm thinking about, podcasts are great because it's like half selfish, half I'm thinking about the other people and all of that. But I'm thinking about the person who's like, gosh, I know that life is short and I should be joyful. And I shouldn't care about my identity and these titles and things, but I can't get past it. I'm in this funk. I like I know I should be more happy or joyful. What would you what would you tell that person, or what is like a tactical exercise or piece of advice you could give?
Well, first of all, the whole life is short, chase, yes, that's true. But I also think the most practical piece of advice I give my students when we have this conversation is just think first about where you can find balance. It's not necessarily, just quit the corporate job and go, gallivant around. Wow, that'd be
Right.
the worst advice. I'm not saying that. I'm saying, where in your corporate job can you find what brings you joy, even within your job? For me, that was the immigration pro bono work. I that it filled my heart
Yeah.
so intensely. I didn't care if I was there till 2 a.m. filling out, paperwork. I didn't care. I loved it. And I look back and I realize, yes, I loved recruiting for the law firm because I love people. This is, where this keeps showing up. And I just find the closer we pay attention to what is working for us throughout the day, even if overall it's another hard day at work, another day of whatever it may be. This is so random that this just popped in my head. This is so random. But I just saw this girl on Instagram who said, yeah, my favorite part of the day at work was when I was eating the lunch that I packed, but I never had the right little container to bring my salad dressing. So I invented individual packet salad dressings that are like clean, that are healthy. And I just recreated my favorite recipes because that's what brought me joy. I'm like, that's what I'm talking about is start so small. She clocked that her salad dressing was so important to her at work, and look where she is now.
Wow.
It's these
That's
tiny
true.
through lines.
Yeah, that's really true. And so it does get to be that granular because I think we often just like bypass that. I know I'm certainly like guilty of kind of this like, oh, I should be, not paying attention to those little moments, but like, do I love like building big businesses? Like what are the big, huge things that are impressive that I should be paying attention to? But maybe it's actually the opposite. And maybe it should be really like those simple, small things as well. Um,
Kind of on this note, I just know that success doesn't bring happiness, and I know it just doesn't. Paper success, it just doesn't. There's always something else. There's always, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and more grandiose, and your aspirations get crazier because it's like, okay, however many years ago, if you would have told me I would have written a book, I'd be like, that is amazing. What do you mean? I would have been, whoa, like that is so unbelievably cool. Well, now I'm like, ugh, I'm over it. I guess I have to write a second one because you know what's more impressive than writing a book? Writing two. It's like these monkeys are so mean. Or
yes.
like, it's like, oh, well, what's more impressive than getting a job at a big law firm, being partner? And it doesn't end. And it's like, "Oh, okay, so we're just chasing what? Retirement? I don't okay, you are dying to make 20 bucks at your lemonade stand. You make 20, you wanna make 30." This is
Yeah.
it just is this receding horizon because and I've really only recently started critically thinking about success because so many people I know that have accomplished the dreams they set out to accomplish are over it by the time the accomplishment happens.
Mm,
They're over
yeah.
it.
You're like
How
moving
many
the goalpost already, right? Like you've
how
already
many college graduates are like, "Wow, I did it. They're like, I've got 5 minutes until my lease starts in this new city and my new job. Like they are off to the next thing. And that's just, I find that in anticipation of this phone call, I was actually thinking about this exact theme. When people talk about work life or when they talk about balance, they're talking about work life balance. I actually think the hardest balance in life to achieve is being grateful enough for the present moment and proud of yourself for how far you've come with balancing that with being focused on the future and setting new goals.
Yeah, I think
That
you've
is
nailed it.
so hard.
Yes.
It's like, oh, okay, my sister just had her second baby a couple months ago. Do you know how many people are asking her if she's having a third?
It's
The treadmill doesn't stop unless you slow it.
have we gotten worse at that? Like, I really wonder, and I don't know if there's a proper answer to that, but I'm really curious from your perspective. Like, you researched this, you've written about this. This is a theme, right? And so, what do you think about that? Have we gotten worse as a society at like living into joy a little bit or gratitude?
Do think we need to be, of course, I think we need to be leaning more into joy because it's tangible and it's tiny. Happiness, success, are they intermingled? Are they not? Receding horizon. I don't really know what the word happiness means. Joy, I know her.
Hmm.
I know her, you know?
Yeah, I
And
do.
and tiny joys stack up if you let them. And we can't wait for we just can't sit around focused on only the cap and gown days of our life
Yeah.
because that's just the vast, 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 vast minority
Hmm.
of these beautiful days that we're gifted on this earth. And I think slowing down is the answer when tech and the corporate drive and all these things just say faster, faster, faster. I think the best life's lived in the slowdown,
Hmm.
even if it's 5 minutes out of your day.
That was going to be my question was like, how do you allow joy? And I'm kind of reflecting on, I think it was Brene Brown who talked about joy is like one of the most vulnerable or the most vulnerable emotion that you can experience. And I feel like I understand that because it's hard for me to often like, how do I just let myself relax into this moment and actually feel that sense of joy without my other half of my brain that wants to just make this moment productive all of the time. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts there?
It's interesting because I asked my students a couple years ago about their relationship with social media. And I said, when you're out and about and taking photos, does that take you out of the moment or bring you into it? And in terms of how do I stay in this present moment and not turn it into productivity? That's the conversation that comes to mind is that question to my students does taking a photo take you out of the moment or bring you into it? And I think watching that distinction, like when you're on your phone and taking photos, if you can turn that into a little, I hate the word hack, but I'm going to use it. If you can turn that into a little hack of like, look at that beauty over there. Look at that beautiful thing. Look at this ice cream. Look at this, and you're documenting it as a memory for you and not as media for others, that to me is an example of how to live in the slowdown in a way that carves out a tiny moment of time for you.
That is so good. That is so specific. And when you said that, I was like, gosh, it does help me bring, like, I am brought more into that moment. That is wild. And I have done a very bad job of taking photos lately. So that might explain, like, how can I start, like, bringing myself more into that present? I really like that.
And another little example that is related to that, the visuals of joy on this note of paying attention to the world around us, taking a little photo, finding beauty where we can. There's science behind it. And my favorite book on this subject is Joyful by Ingrid Fattel Lee. And if you are looking for more joy in your life, that is a great place to start because she explains Like, why do we feel joy when we look at rainbow sprinkles? And she takes you through the evolutionary science behind why. And it's color from, in nature represents abundance, represents, health and whatever it may be, whether it's vegetables or whatever our ancestors were needing to survive. And she explains that sharp edges represent danger, whereas something like a bunch of balloons that are round are non threatening. And so, if you are looking to increase joy in your life, I encourage you to look up her work. But she also has this amazing online community, and people report about where they see joy and how joy is showing up in their life. It is the dreamiest corner of the internet. I 100 out of 10 recommend The School of Commons by Ingrid Fattel Lee. And you're just talking to people all over the world who are reporting live. And it's a small community, and it just feels like the best example of a little digital detox. So that's my other tip.
Okay, we'll definitely be dropping that link in the show notes for people for sure. I'm going to be checking that out as well. I can just kind of envision what that looks like and feels like. Um, and these are such good tactical tips for us as far as like how do we explore this idea a little bit more. And I think you've really brought that into perspective. I'm curious. I know, as we kind of start to close this out. And I know this is a little bit of a cliche question, but I do want to ask it to you, which is, if you're sitting across from that younger woman, that younger self that is starting to head into law school, what words of advice do you have now for that version of you?
Trust the process. And I know that that's a little cheesy, but I tell my students too, there's no such thing as a wasted experience unless you waste it. People say, "Oh, you don't practice law." Do you use your degree all the time? Every day? I
Hmm.
I I loved law school because, yes, I learned a lot of technical things, but I also learned that I can do really hard things. Speaking of zooming out and having big takeaways, that is a very big takeaway. Is I know I can do hard things, and it made me so much less afraid of challenges that have come since, is I'm kinda like, "Okay, time to buckle in, like, I got it." And and that is a really wonderful feeling to know that I've strengthened that muscle and can handle a challenge.
Yeah. What a great perspective. I'm glad that I can think about my own degree differently and such a good, kind of quote of like the experiences you have are not wasted. Um, really good for people to know that. What is bringing you joy right now?
Well, as a Harry Styles super fan, I have to tell you that he kicked off his tour about a month ago, and I am so excited. It's been 3 years since he's performed live. I have patiently waited along with all the other super fans, and I'm loving the new album, and I specifically wanna tell your listeners to listen to a song called Carla's Song. And to me, it's all about how there is beauty and joy and abundance in this world waiting for us to discover it. And so to me, it just is dead on the money with a lot of the themes in the book about how joy is everywhere if we know how to look for it. So the last track on the new album, 11 out of 10, absolute favorite. Definitely give it a listen.
I love that. We'll definitely recommend that for everyone. I can't wait to listen, and we'll make sure your book is linked as well for people to check out. I am so glad that you're here. As a final closing tradition on this podcast, I ask whoever I'm interviewing to leave like a quote or reflection or something that they feel called to share for the next guest, not knowing who it is. So I'd like to read what was left for you and then give you the opportunity to do the same. So the quote that was left for you is
Love this.
there is no perfect time to just go for it. There is always going to be a reason not to do something. And I think to pursue any kind of journey, especially an entrepreneurship journey, you have to be very stubborn and you have to be willing to take 50 no's and ignore them and just charge through. So if I could leave anything, it would be don't wait for the perfect moment. That perfect moment or perfect time is never going to come, and just make a decision and go for it and see what happens.
I love that. I
Yeah.
I
Yeah, I
also
feel like you're
yeah.
making some decisions right now. You're, experiencing a big move and, some exciting things coming your way. So, perhaps that kinda lands in a certain
Yes,
way for you. So,
that
yeah.
really lands. So, I have 2 answers, I hope that's allowable.
Yes.
My friend Amanda Henry, she is in the middle of starting her new business, which is all about women's health and wellness, and it's called Well Honestly. And I have loved following along her journey. And she posted something the other day, and 2 words just hit me like a truck in the best way. And the 2 words are impress yourself. And as we're struggling with what the definition of success is, it's not about what anyone else thinks because external measures, they're always going to fail you. Someone is always doing more. Oh, okay, you were number 2 on some list. You're thinking about who was number 1, right? It just it's going to fail you 9 times out of 10. But if you're making your younger self proud, that to me is such kind of a powerful compass
Yeah.
to use. And my ultimate piece of advice that I want to leave the next guest. This is my best piece of advice I can give on any subject, anything. It comes from my dear friend Luke. And in some of my hardest days, he said, 1 vote for your head, 1 vote for your heart, and 3 votes for your gut.
Mm.
It works like a charm. And I tell my students, I write that on the whiteboard. They have heard me say that time and time again. And I actually had a student call me the other day from a couple years ago, and he said, "You know what has stuck with me the most? 1 vote for your head, 1 vote for your heart, and 3 votes for your gut." And I said, "Well, good, because it's stuck with me all these years too."
Wow. That's fantastic. So phenomenal and just I don't know, my mind is really blown by this conversation. I needed to have this talk with you more than maybe anybody else listening. So I'm just really grateful. And gosh, thank you for the work that you're doing, the way that you're showing up, the joy that you are finding. And then clearly that is having just a massive ripple effect on so many. Thank you for being here. And so truly just value you and just want to say how much I appreciate this conversation.
Well, thank you. Highlight of my day by a mile. So thank you so
Oh,
much.
me too. Yeah, absolutely.